You're listening to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars begins now.
All right, well, hello, everybody. I'm Eric Vansel.
I'm Daryl Sanders.
And we're your hosts for this show. So, as we've been doing on Fridays, because remember, Monday we talk about what is Star Wars and everything that goes into it, and we've been reviewing a lot of the films now. You know, we started out with the first episode where we did the legacy and pretty much what goes into it, and then we started with the original trilogy, and Monday we're going to be doing Attack of the Clones. We got the second episode of the prequels coming up, but first we continue our Bad Batch Season 2 review. And so far, up until now anyway, you know, we've been treated to some really, really good episodes, great storytelling, everything else. This episode, I remember, and last episode, I remember we agreed that it was pretty much a fun adventure. I ended up finding some things that maybe they had a little bit more depth with the whole pod racing and all that, or riot racing as it was called. You were pretty much, I don't know if there was that much into it, in it for me, but I enjoyed it. But one of the things that I wanted to bring up, though, because I meant to actually talk about this in a few of the last episodes, and one of those things was the animation. You know, I really think that the animation has really stepped up and has become quite amazing.
Yeah, I mean, the animation on the show has always been good. You know, I've always enjoyed it. I think that, you know, the fact that one guy does all the voices of the Clone Force 99, man, you know, and I would just marvel at that, you know, the fact that he gives them all their own distinct sound, and, you know, he doesn't mix up the voices of one coming out of the other.
Yeah, I mean, that's actually a really good point, and that's something that we should point out, actually, because you're right. It is the same guy doing all the voices, and he does
Except
meticulously.
Omega.
Right, except Omega. That I would be super impressed if he was doing Omega.
Yeah, I know, right?
Hey, but you know what? With different vocoders and AI and all that, you know, I mean, he could. He doesn't, but he could. Yeah, but I mean, you know, the animation I think is really amazing. I think the music is really cool. That's something that I actually wanted to point out a while ago. I actually meant to say this over the last few episodes, and you know, I kept forgetting to do it. So I wanted to definitely do that this time. But I think both you and I, when it comes to this episode, I remember we were talking a little bit before the show, and yeah, you know, I'll say this. It is a continuation of a little bit more of just a fun adventure. I think that overall, I liked a little bit of the story and what it could have been. I just think that this was not really done as well. I think they could have done more. I really enjoyed a lot of the music in this too, and in fact, when they first discover that, you know, tumor, that little passageway or whatever, is very much reminiscent to me of Indiana Jones. That's kind of what the music sort of reminded me of. And I
think that was intentional.
I do too. I absolutely do too, especially since they're both Lucasfilm properties. I think that they were going for more of an Indiana Jones type of a feel, and maybe because remember, the Acolyte is said to be somewhat of like a female Indiana Jones type of a thing. Like, it kind of has that feel to it, which is weird to me because it's also about the Sith. But I think that we were talking about how, you know, maybe somebody is, or the main character is maybe attempting to, you know, go find Sith artifacts or something like that. So, I mean, that could work in the Star Wars universe, but yeah, this one, I don't know, it just felt kind of hollow and a little empty and just not a whole lot of substance, really. I mean, it was kind of fun, but I mean, you want to talk about, now, this is a comment that you made before. Last week, you said if you took this episode out, nobody would miss it. And I I countered a little bit. I mean, I didn't totally disagree, but I countered a little bit and said, well, I don't know. There's some things that, Sid's friendship with them. And like, there were some things in there that I had pointed out. And if you missed it, you can go check out the last episode. But don't do it until we're done with this one. But, there were some things. This one I absolutely think you can take out. And nobody...
Oh.
Like, it would not affect the story one iota. So, go ahead. I mean, that's basically what I was thinking. What are your overall thoughts on this episode?
This is garbage.
Man does not mince words.
No, man. I mean,
these last couple have been very Visions-like for you.
I know, right? That's why I feel like I'm watching sometimes. I mean, it's
better animation, though.
True story. Yeah, I think this episode of The Bad Batch was just, if this is not the definition of a filler episode, I don't know what is. I mean,
I'm right there with you on that one.
I
mean, I said the whole time, I'm like, we ran out of ideas, huh? Or maybe it's bridging.
Yeah, already? Yeah, I don't know. It's just, I mean, this would have been cool if it had something to do with, well, something. If it had, like, okay, when they did the treasure thing before with Cyrano, okay, at least you could tie that to the Clone Wars. You bring in a Dooku, his home, like, okay, this is familiar things that we're familiar with. Okay, great. And you're okay. Dooku was very wealthy. I could see the connection.
Mm-hmm.
This, though, I mean, it's just kind of like, all right. And, Wanda Sykes doing the voice of Fee. I could not wait for her to shut up. I mean, and I like Wanda. I think she's a great supporting actress, in my opinion. She's a cool comedian at times, but I couldn't get over her just like listening to her the whole time. Like, her voice got annoying after a while. I'm just like, would you shut up, or shoot her, or something? It's just like I couldn't even really enjoy it or get into it because of her voice. And then she's trying to be Wanda Sykes in this instead of being another character. I think if you remember, if somebody said that the Aladdin live action, when Will Smith played the genie, it was like they didn't feel like he was playing a genie. They felt like he was just being Will Smith. They didn't feel that there was a difference. And I think that's one of the things that you have to do when you have a very familiar voice, like Ernie Hudson, right? Ernie Hudson made you feel like he was this gangster kind of guy, and they got a person with that type of voice for that role, and he played that role that,
Well, here's the difference, though. And I totally agree with what you're saying. I think that, and this is a distinction. The difference is Ernie Hudson doesn't have a shtick, right? He's not
exactly
a character. Whereas what you're talking about is people who are not playing a role, they're playing themselves projected onto a character.
Exactly. And that's mainly, that's one of the biggest things that took me out of this episode. I mean, I might have been able to get with it a little bit more, but that alone just like, okay, I couldn't wait for it to be over with, honestly.
Yep. Yep. I know.
And then, like I said, it was filler. It didn't advance anything. Like, none of the character development, it didn't advance the overall story. It was just like, okay, like it looked like this episode was, all right, they're all kind of sitting in there in a little bar, in Sid's bar or what have you, and they all look bored. And then Wrecker comes in with Omega, and they're like, okay, we went to the junkyard, probably found a compressor, we found some stuff. And it's like, all right, Fee comes up and just like, okay, yeah, this is a compass that, that means treasure and blah, 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 blah. And it is kind of like, all right, well, we ain't got nothing else to do, so might as well just go do this.
Well, now here's the thing.
And that's what it felt like.
Right, but I mean, now that I could have hung with, though. Because to me, and this is one of the problems that I think Star Wars has, and I think Star Wars fans actually perpetuate this, And that is because you have so much lore and you have so much, going on. I think that sometimes people lose the patience for just having a really good story. Something that maybe doesn't forward the canon or something like that. But I think the point that you're making, and definitely the point that I'm making, is that unfortunately that was absent in this episode. But I say that because to me it wasn't necessarily the fact that you didn't have something that would quote unquote advance the story, right? And again, I think this goes back to something you said last week, where this is what happens when you have 16 episodes to play with in a season. You're bound to get more filler. I mean, if you have to do it in 8 to 10 episodes, each of the episodes is, because you're going to have a story for that particular season, like an overarching story arc, right? Something that
it's
kind of like point A to point B, and it's basically what happens along the way and how do these characters get to the climactic episode or whatever. Whereas sometimes, and this is why I think it's good to have longer seasons, maybe not 16 episodes, maybe 12 or 14 or something, but I think that it's nice to have where, not everything is so dramatic and important to the overall thing, right? Because look, these guys are basically a group that just takes on missions and earns money, and I mean, okay, so they're in between big missions. I mean, I think they even made the point to say that during the episode in the bar. It's kind of like, well, all right, we're in between missions. Sure, let's go find this thing. But the problem is what they did with it. The problem is, like you said, it didn't go anywhere.
Yeah. I mean, my thing is like, okay, at least make the treasure something of value.
Right.
Like we didn't get anything at the end of this. Like, okay, what was the point? And that's why I felt like it's like, okay, if at least I could see if they did something like this. Like, hey, this is a treasure to or a map to a Jedi temple or something, and maybe there's a bunch of lightsabers that you guys can use as weapons or stuff, or maybe some technology that you can, okay, cool. And then let's say they go down there, okay, and they run into all the calamity or whatever, and it's like, okay, well, we're trying to get these at least make it within universe. But then for us to go into this thing and we find a giant robotic dinosaur that's okay, what the heck?
Mecha
What was it
Godzilla
for?
or something. I know.
Yeah,
well, that's it. See, my criticism is, I didn't mind the whole, what was it called, Heart of the Mountain thing or something. We can get a lot of. That's fine. Like I said, I don't need it to be some Sith artifact or some important thing like that. It's if it has value. But my problem is that, yeah, first of all, there's no background. They introduce this thing, but we never know what it is. There's no reason to be invested in it. And here's the other thing. Here's the other reason why. This is why I really. You said that a lot of times it was Wanda Sykes' performance that took you out of the story a lot. And I would agree with that wholeheartedly because it was the same thing. But I got to say that I could have even overlooked that. What really took me out of the story constantly was all the cliches that were in this. It's like everything from, they remove the statue thing and the temple thing starts to fall apart, or what were some of the other ones? I mean, it was just like every type of cliche that's in that kind of adventure, they did. Every one of them. The group gets separated. It just.
Oh, I mean, to me, that doesn't so much bother me because it's kind of a part of that whole treasure hunting. I mean, you see that in National Treasure, Indiana Jones. I mean, it's kind of part
of. But that's my point. It's like it's like every time. I didn't mind.
But I mean, that's almost like in a horror movie though. Like, oh, someone always trips and falls, and
I hate that too. See, because that's another thing. Well, that's the thing.
I hate that too.
It's like it's these overused cliches. It's like, come on, man. I mean, you can. I mean, the thing is like what they suddenly. I get the whole like paralyzed with fear thing, and so here's a cliche in a horror movie that I could deal with. I could deal with the fact that you have this killer after you. What's the one thing that you do that you, for some reason, every victim thinks it's a good idea? I'm going to run up the stairs. Like, okay, now you're guaranteed to have really no way out now. But I get that, right? In fear, you're not really thinking. But the fact that these people have the coordination of a Chevy Chase skit when they're, suddenly where they're tripping constantly, or, the car that basically was perfectly fine the whole movie suddenly doesn't start. Like, it suddenly develops problems. And again, that's because they have to introduce things in the world that will stall them enough so the killer who only walks and never runs can catch up to them. And it's just been overdone. And in this type of a story, it's the same thing. It's like, okay, sure, they're going to grab it and the thing's going to start to fall apart because, and again, part of the reason why I think it's done is because it's plausible, right? I mean, if they're going to actually have this treasure, they want to protect it, so they booby trap it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just, and it was the way that it was done too. I mean, it wasn't even done in a creative way. It was just so... Here is the textbook. Yeah, in everything. I wish I can remember, because there was at least 3 things in this short, 25?
Shine your light through this thing and it'll reveal all the little markings on the wall,
And of course, Omega figures that out. Granted, I get it. She's a strategist or whatever. But again, it's like, the newbie, the inexperienced person... Which, again, you could say, okay, they're going to approach it from a new angle maybe because, again, I get that too, right? I understand, but it just, for some reason, some of the cliched storytelling tropes they used in this and some of the other little devices, like I said, it was just one after the other. It got to the point where I was like, okay, when they do this, this is going to happen. And that's the kind of thing that takes me out of the story. When you become that predictable, I can't hang with that.
Yeah, no, I totally get it. That's what I'm saying. I think that's why I said this whole episode was just kind of it didn't really advance the story at all, or anything. Even give us a new one. Like, granted, if it's not going to advance the current story, at least give us a new story that's cool. But it didn't do that. You gave us a very boring performance from Wanda Sykes.
Also cliche, by the way. A lot of the stuff that she was doing and saying.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
It's like, really? Can we get anything different in this? Anything at all?
Yeah.
Just put the bad in Bad Batch. It's,
exactly.
The saying.
Had me longing for the prequels.
Right? Or even the sequels. At least the Rise of Skywalker had the decency to move quickly.
Right.
This thing was just like, dude.
Yeah, man. It's just like, okay, what are we doing here? It's like, okay, now this thing unearths from the mountain, and it's like some weird robot Godzilla that's terrorizing, it's just burning up stuff, and it's like, okay, well,
and for what?
Yeah, like
see, that's the other thing. It's like, obviously this Heart of the Mountain thing was, they plugged it into this thing and it stops its rampage, right? You remove it, it starts its rampage. Okay, so now, who built it? Why did they... did somebody create that Heart of the Mountain thing for them to... And that's how they managed to stop... there's so many questions that not only are they unanswered, I mean, they didn't even address any of this stuff. You were just supposed to take it at face value. And this thing's older than the Jedi, apparently.
Yeah, and now everybody's all like, well, at the end of it, I was like, and they even kind of said it was like, okay, well, we didn't get anything from it. It's like, well, we did realize that it was true though, like the legend or the myth was true. That's the right attitude. It's like, oh my god, like get me out of here. Just please hurry.
I'll tell you what, they didn't get it. We didn't get anything out of it either.
Exactly.
It's
you ain't the only thing. Exactly.
I mean, I don't understand. And again, I mean, you brought it up. I too don't understand. Well, what was the point? I mean, because there's a difference between a filler episode and a bridge episode, right? Where
sure.
And a lot of times you can't really tell the difference when you first see it. You have to wait a couple of episodes and see, hey, did this thing actually lead to something? Where you kind of reflect back, like, okay, maybe it wasn't a total filler episode. But you can, and then there's some where I think that the people that are creating it mean something. Like I always point out the Mandalorian spider egg thing or whatever, right? Where they were trapped by that spider with the frog lady.
Yeah.
So obviously that was the first episode of a greater story arc that did actually have a lot of meaning behind it. And so I think that Filoni and Favreau would argue that that's very much a bridge episode, not a filler. Well, what I would counter...
But they also, they even introduced like the... almost like a Rangers of the New Republic type thing because you had those...
Oh, you talking about the New Republic officer guys?
Who were in X-Wings, and they were following them, at first, and then they eventually came to kind of help rescue them, and, like, at least we got a little bit of advancement in that.
We did, but I mean, the way that I would counter it if somebody tried to call that a bridge episode, and I mean, I might begrudgingly agree, depending on the day that it was, but I would argue it almost suffers from the Phantom Menace problem, where it's not that it totally sucked or anything, but if you're looking at the overall story, it wasn't really a bridge because you didn't need it. You could have went right to the second episode and gotten all the information that you needed. That's all. So it's filler-ish. But this, like you said, had zero value in any way, shape, or form.
Hot garbage.
I mean, unless maybe this was designed to give Fee a little bit of a spotlight or something.
And honestly, that's what I felt like it was for. I felt like, because they've shown her, a couple of times, and I feel like, okay, well, we got to do something with her. Well, I don't know. She's a pirate. Let's kind of have a treasure,
Well, here's the thing, though.
Or something like that.
And that's a good point, because I thought, what was she introduced? Like 2 episodes ago or something like that?
She was introduced like pretty much...
I was like right
in the beginning when they first very first episode, I think.
Yeah, that's right. But I mean, judging by the comments that she made, see, I was really intrigued by her backstory at that point, because it's like, okay, who is this chick? Because she obviously, it seemed like she knew some stuff and everything. And I mean, they did they sort of implied that a little bit with this episode, because the couple of things that I thought that they did right, even though, some of the comments were just, well, we won't go there.
Right.
But what they did do right, I thought, was they ended up giving her that whole, hey, I've done this a million times. I'm super experienced at this. I'm not going to be shaken up by anything. Kind of Indiana Jones-ish in that sense, too. But what I liked, it wasn't too crazy, because, sometimes the other trap that a lot of times they fall when they do things like this, when you have that seasoned adventurer, whatever it is, in this case, usually it's an archaeologist or something, right? Looking for a hidden treasure, maybe a pirate, some seasoned veteran of doing this. They sometimes tend to make them overpowered. It's almost like they're almost too relaxed. It's like, okay, look, I get that you've done this a million times, but a lot of times I'll point to the great Steve Alten book series, Meg, which of course they made a movie out of a couple of years ago, and the sequel's coming out this year, I believe. Now, movies notwithstanding, trust me, the books were completely different. Okay, completely different, really good. And one of the things is that the main character, Jonas, would have to, in virtually every book, go back and swim with the megalodon, right? He'd have to go and basically when he was trying to kill it or capture it or whatever, ends up doing it. Okay. After a while, he gets used to it, but he still never loses that, holy crap, I'm swimming with the megalodon, this is kind of freaking me out thing. It's like he's experienced at it, but he still understands that, yeah, this is a dangerous thing, and it's kind of a freaky thing. And I think that sometimes with a lot of these adventure stories, they almost, like I said, they almost make the main character too cavalier and too casual about it, when it's like, look, I mean, I get it, you've done it a million times, but you could still get killed by a tribe or something, you know what I mean? It's
right. All it takes is one poison tip dart.
Yeah, right, exactly. It's like, or you're trapped. I mean, and again, with this episode, I kind of like that one scene where, they did the puzzle wrong or whatever, and they're all like, we're trapped in here. She's like, there's always a way out or something. I mean, that to me sort of showed like, look, it's happened to me a million times. It's fine. It's not as bad as it looks. That I can handle. And in a lot of ways, I don't necessarily think that they overpowered her, but I think in some ways, especially later on, they made her a little too cavalier. Because, I mean, that whole thing to where they got the heart of the mountain thing, but then the whatever, the Mecha Godzilla or whatever it was, kind of went up, and they're sort of being thrown around. I mean, I don't care how experienced you are. You don't know what's happening, you're going to be freaked out.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, and then like, I felt like, the outside of Wrecker, our clones didn't use any of their abilities. Like Tech didn't solve something, Hunter didn't sniff out some or find a trail of, like it just felt very mindless to me.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the only thing that I would maybe suggest is that Tech tried to. I mean, I did think it was cool that, this was not a technical challenge to be solved. It was a little bit more, I mean, I hesitate to say mystical, but, his usual thing didn't really work, and I thought that was cool. But I agree.
Yeah, I mean, I just think, I mean, he tried with the whole, like, analyzing the rocks. These have been, around from...
Well, I'm even talking about when he tried to stop the robot rampage, right? Because, I mean, the conclusion they came to is like, look, you got to jam that thing back in here. It's just saying.
Well, that's what set it off, then put it back.
Exactly. It was really kind of a sort of a obvious thing, right?
Yeah.
But
open and shut case type thing.
Exactly. But if you remember, though, Tech actually was, with a couple of his tools or something, he was trying to reverse engineer the thing to see if he can, as, if he put it, find the kill switch. It was either her or Omega said that. I don't remember which one. Didn't care about that point.
It was Fee. She's like, yeah, can't you find the kill switch? Because she wanted to keep the whole thing that had the power.
Right.
So she's like, yeah, can't you find a kill switch or something?
Which is yet another thing. I mean, kind of harkens back to Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. I mean, it's just... But I digress. Yeah, but Tech did try to use this thing. But you're right. I mean, Wrecker was really the only effective one. I mean, I thought it was cool that whatever that overgrown Minoc looking thing or whatever it was, and again, there was a little Jurassic Parkish kind of a thing going. And, again, it was another cliche where naturally the thing seemed to be completely impervious to all the laser beams shooting at it, which is another cliche. But I did like the fact that Wrecker was the one that, just kind of like, okay, whatever, grabbed it and threw it out a window,
Like, screw it. Yeah.
It's like, you know what? Hey, I mean, might have to go the old-fashioned way. And, I mean, I get it because in a lot of ways you would think that there are things in this universe or whatever that maybe is impervious to laser bolts. I mean, you also don't want to go too far the other way where that's a be-all, end-all. On the other hand...
Yeah, I mean, just like that little dragon thing that was attacking Palpatine. Remember, like, the lightsabers and stuff wasn't working on it? It was just like, all right, you got to find another way to deal with it.
Yeah, and I mean, that's kind of clever, even though I'm sure Palpatine was like, oh, really wish I could shoot this thing with my lightning or choke it, because he wanted to. I mean, to me, that is still one of the best episodes to me of the Clone Wars, because, and again, that was Filoni wanting to do his Godzilla thing. That's what he had said. And I have a feeling that this Bad Batch episode was another one of those, well, now I want to do the Mecha Godzilla thing. But I did like the fact in that Clone Wars episode that, it was after Palpatine. Like, it's just like, you know what? You are not a cool guy. I want to kill you. And it's just because everybody's like, why is it after him? Well,
the fact that the Jedi were also trying to protect Palpatine, they're like fighting feverishly to protect somebody that really should just, let die, or,
I know, you got to wonder if, like, during the lightsaber battle with Mace, if he wasn't just going, man, really should have let that thing take you out. Because you're right, that was another really sort of mind-trippy thing, right? Is that here you had these guys that Palpatine wants to and eventually will destroy, protecting them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know that must have just made him so happy, at the irony of it. Like, if you only knew, kind of thing. So,
right.
But again, I mean, that's the problem, is that even to shine any kind of a light or any kind of a, hey, let's get a little bit of meaning behind this scene or that scene, we actually have to go to other episodes in this series or other shows.
Right.
Because, this thing was just so devoid of anything of value. I kind of want to go back.
Would you rate this?
Ooh.
Oh
man,
that's the
it's tough.
Question.
Well, I mean, here's the thing, and this is the reason why it's a little tough for me, because again, it's not so much that the apologist type nature is coming out or anything like that. I don't. You know how, like, we have that thing where we have a really hard time giving 9s and 10s because we always want to reserve that for the truly great. And as much as we might like an episode of something, we're like, well, I don't know if I want to give it a 10, because there are some problems with it. And that's usually how we put it, right? We go, well, I'm going to give it an 8 or a 9 or something because it was an outstanding episode, but, there were some problems. This is almost the opposite, where I really want to save the 0s and 1s for the truly abysmal. Stuff to where there is absolutely no redeeming quality. Now, I'm going to admit that this is close. So, I think I'm going to give it a 3. Only because...
That's what I'm giving it to.
Okay. Because, I mean, they're like I said, again, they're knocking it out of the park with the animation. The music was cool. The callback to the Indiana Jones thing was cool. The idea was good. It's just, once again, as is typical Star Wars, it just suffered from poor execution.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say the same thing. I would just... Yeah, I just thought it was they were trying to be fun with it. I saw where they were going, where their heart was, but it just didn't land with me. But so yeah, I'll have to definitely echo, no pun intended.
I see what you did there. Well, technically.
Oh. Yeah, you gotta hunt for that.
Oh no! All right, we gotta stop torturing these puns here. I mean, you know, we actually do want people to like and subscribe. And if you haven't liked and subscribed, make sure that you like this video, subscribe to the channel. We have gotten a few extra subscribers, which is cool. Welcome all the, the new subscribers. One person actually subscribed because of our Phantom Menace review last week. So apparently you guys are enjoying these in-depth analysis of the films and everything. And I have to admit, I look forward to those. It's nice because when we started this whole show, podcast, whatever, The Last Jedi had just been released. So there's all these, even though we have talked about all the other films, we've never actually gone through and done in-depth reviews on them before. And what's going to be interesting is when we get to the sequels, because again, we did do The Last Jedi and we did The Rise of Skywalker. It's going to be interesting now to revisit those reviews and see how we feel about them 3, 4, 5 years down the road. Because Rise of Skywalker was the first one that we did, we actually, for that one, did a non-spoiler review and then a spoiler review. So, the day we saw it and came back and did the show.
Yeah.
So, that's pretty significant. So you guys are not going to want to miss Monday at 8 o'clock when we actually do Attack of the Clones. That's going to be a lot of fun to do. I'm looking forward to doing these next two because, yeah. And it's been slow enough in the news that it affords us the opportunity to do it. So, there's some things here and there that are going on in Star Wars, but it's not anything so earth-shattering that, we can't do this. So you're definitely going to want to check it out. And then, of course, hopefully the Bad Batch swings back. So next Friday at 8 o'clock when we do episode 6, maybe we'll have a slightly different review. So hopefully you guys can join us. Again, hit the like and subscribe button if you haven't done so already. It really helps the channel. And we want to be able to discuss Star Wars with you guys for many years to come. So with that, I'm Eric Vansel.
I'm Daryl Sanders.
May the Force be with you.
Always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter @HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.